The days in the nursing home stretched on like a never-ending blur. I woke up to the same sterile room, the same walls that offered no comfort, and the same repetitive sounds. The shuffle of slippers against the floor, the hum of overhead lights, and the distant murmur of voices from down the hall. I couldn't stand it. But it wasn't just the isolation that ate at me. It was the feeling of being treated like I was invisible, like I had no say in my own life. I had lived for decades taking care of myself. I had raised my children, worked hard, and built a life that was mine. But here in this place, I was nothing more than another elderly woman who needed to be looked after. I spent the first few days in a haze, barely speaking to anyone, keeping to myself. It was easier that way. I didn't want to get to know anyone, didn't want to make connections. I felt betrayed by Carla and Ben, by the very people I had given everything to. How could they think that I needed to be here, that I wasn't capable of living my life on my own? One afternoon after lunch, I decided I'd had enough. I couldn't stay in that room any longer. I grabbed my walker, the metal legs scraping against the floor as I made my way down the hall. I wasn't going to let this place swallow me whole. As I passed the nurses' station, I noticed a sign on the bulletin board. Creative writing class, Thursdays at 2 p.m. Something to do. I wasn't sure if I had it in me, but I was determined to find a way to take control of my life again. The next Thursday, I showed up to the class, my hands shaking with nerves. The room was filled with older faces, some of them in wheelchairs, others with walkers like mine. There was a young woman at the front of the room, holding a pen and notebook, ready to lead the session. She smiled when I entered. "Welcome," she said warmly. "I'm Jenny. We're glad to have you join us." I nodded and sat down, the old wooden chair creaking beneath me. I felt out of place, like I was being judged for being here, like they could see through me and know how much I hated it. But I kept my head down, focused on the notebook in front of me. "Today, we're going to write about something that makes you feel alive," Jenny said. "Something that gives you energy and purpose." The room fell into a quiet hum as everyone began to write. I sat there, the pen hovering over the paper, trying to think of something that made me feel alive. Something that wasn't this. And then it came to me. I wrote about my garden. About the flowers I used to grow, the way the sun would warm my back as I worked in the dirt, the feeling of my hands covered in soil, creating something beautiful from the earth. It was the first time in weeks I felt a spark of life. I didn't have to sit in this sterile room and let my memories fade. I could still be who I was. When the class was over, Jenny came up to me. "That was beautiful, Margaret," she said softly. "You've got a real gift for writing." For the first time since I'd arrived here, I felt seen. Not as an old woman who needed help, but as someone with a story, with a voice. The next few weeks were a blur of writing sessions, and I found myself looking forward to Thursdays. Jenny had suggested I try writing about my life, about my marriage to Frank, about raising Carla and Ben, about the years I spent as a mother, a wife, and a woman who was proud of her independence. It wasn't easy, but it felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself I had buried long ago. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I was sitting in the lounge, reading my latest writing assignment, when a nurse came in. Her name was Lisa, and she was one of the more kind-hearted staff members. She smiled at me and sat down across from me. "Margaret, I just wanted to let you know that your family is coming to visit today," she said gently. Froze. Carla and Ben. Were they finally coming to apologize? To take me home? The thought sent a wave of anxiety through me. "They're on their way right now," Lisa said, noticing my change in expression. "Don't worry, I'll make sure they don't interrupt your piece if you don't feel like talking to them." I hadn't seen them in weeks. The thought of seeing them now, after everything that had happened, felt like a confrontation I wasn't sure I was ready for. I stood up, my legs shaking. "I'm going to go outside for a bit," I said, trying to calm my nerves. Lisa nodded and gave me a warm, understanding smile. "I'll tell them when they arrive. Take your time." I stepped outside into the courtyard, the cold air hitting my face. I needed space to think, to breathe. I walked toward the small garden that had been set up in the back, the one they kept well maintained. It was no substitute for the garden I once had, but it was something. As I stood there, the wind rustling the leaves, I thought about what I had been through. The nursing home, the separation from my family, the silence. And then I realized something. I didn't have to wait for Carla and Ben's approval. I didn't have to live for them. I had spent my life taking care of others, but now it was time to take care of me. I wasn't going to beg them to let me go. I wasn't going to grovel for my freedom. I would find a way to live the life I had left, with or without their permission. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the crisp air. I was ready to take back my life. At that moment, the door to the courtyard opened, and I turned to see Carla standing there, her face unsure. Ben was with her, but he didn't look at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the ground. I didn't know what they would say. I didn't know what they wanted. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let them decide my future. The chapter of my life wasn't over. It was just beginning. I stood in the courtyard, my hands clenched at my sides, watching Carla and Ben approach. The tension was thick, like a heavy fog that threatened to swallow us whole. I could see the concern in Carla's eyes, the guilt that flickered briefly before she masked it with her usual calm. Ben, on the other hand, was unreadable. His face set in a grim expression as if he were steeling himself for something I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. The silence between us was deafening as they stepped closer, and I felt the weight of their presence press down on me. I hadn't seen them in weeks, and it had felt like a lifetime. The visit they had promised me, the one where they said they would come and take me out of this place, was now just a distant memory. Carla spoke first, her voice soft but carrying an edge. "Mom, we've been trying to reach you. We've been worried." I looked at her, my heart beating faster. She sounded concerned, but I could hear the underlying frustration in her words. The same frustration that had built up between us over the past few years. She didn't understand me. She didn't understand why I fought so hard to stay in my own home, why I refused to accept what they had decided for me. "I've been fine," I said, my voice steady, though it trembled with the anger I was trying to suppress. "I don't need to be here, and you both know it. I didn't need to be sent here." Ben stepped forward, his hands in his pockets, eyes downcast. "Mom, we thought it was what was best for you. You weren't taking care of yourself. You weren't eating, you weren't going out. We didn't know what else to do." I stared at him, a mix of sadness and disbelief running through my veins. "You didn't know what else to do. So you put me in a place like this." I gestured around the courtyard, my voice rising now. "You think this is what's best for me? A nursing home, where I'm surrounded by people who don't even know my name, my life." Carla stepped forward now, her eyes flashing with something I hadn't seen before. Anger, perhaps. "We did this because we love you, Mom. We didn't want you to be alone. We didn't want to see you hurt yourself." I felt the sting of her words like a slap, but I wasn't going to let her see my pain. I wasn't going to let them win this battle. "No, Carla," I said firmly, my voice cold now. "You did this because you wanted control. Because it's easier to put me somewhere out of the way than to face the reality that I don't need your help. I don't need to be here." Ben's face twisted, his frustration evident. "Mom, we only want what's best for you. Why can't you see that?" I stood tall, feeling the fire of my own frustration burning inside me. "Because you don't see me anymore, Ben. You don't see me for who I am. You see a woman who's getting old, and you think that means I need to be taken care of." Carla's lips tightened. "That's not what we're saying. But you can't keep living like this. You can't keep shutting us out. We're your family, and we only want to help." I shook my head slowly, the truth dawning on me with a heavy weight. "I never asked you to help me. I asked for respect. I asked for you to trust me. I've been taking care of myself for years. I don't need a nursing home, and I don't need your pity." Ben's face softened, but there was something else there, something that looked like guilt. "We just didn't know what else to do. We're sorry, Mom. We should have listened to you more. We shouldn't have just taken over." The words felt hollow, but I could hear the sincerity in his voice. He was finally seeing me, even if it had taken this long. Sorry doesn't fix what's been broken, Ben, I said quietly. But I'm willing to give you a chance. I'm willing to try to rebuild this. But not by being shoved into a corner and told what's best for me. Not like that. Carla's eyes softened, and I saw a flicker of understanding there. We've been wrong, Mom. Sorry. I want to make it right. I nodded, my heart still heavy, but my resolve solidifying. I'm not asking you to fix everything. I'm asking you to respect me. To let me live my life the way I want to, and if I need help, I'll ask. I don't need you to make my decisions for me. The air between us was still thick with unspoken words, but something had shifted. We weren't done, not by a long shot, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had been heard. Okay, Carla said, her voice quieter now. We can do that. We can start over. No more decisions made for you. Ben looked at me, his eyes softer now, filled with something close to relief. I'll be here for you, Mom. If you need me, I'm here. No more silences. No more running away from what's hard. I took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a complete fix, but it was a start. A start to rebuilding the trust that had been broken, the connection that had been frayed. I'm willing to try, I said, my voice steady. But don't expect me to be the mother you want me to be. Expect me to be the mother I am. And I'm going to need you to respect that. We stood there in the courtyard, the three of us, finally facing each other. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was enough. It was a beginning. The days following my conversation with Carla and Ben felt like a delicate balancing act. There was still so much pain from the past, so much that hadn't been addressed, and yet there was a new sense of possibility, of healing. We weren't where we needed to be, but at least we were talking, at least we were trying. It wasn't easy. For every step forward there was a hesitation. I could see it in Carla's eyes when she visited, the way she still tried to fix everything, the way she still thought she could control the situation. And in Ben, there was a deep sadness, an apology that lingered unspoken between us. He wanted to make things right, but he didn't know how. I didn't know how either. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let their guilt dictate my life. I had spent too many years trying to make everyone else happy, trying to be what they needed me to be. Now it was my turn. And I had to remind myself of that every day. One afternoon, after a quiet day in my room, I went for a walk around the grounds of the nursing home. The weather was warm for early spring, the flowers beginning to bloom, and the sound of birds chirping in the trees helped clear my mind. It wasn't my garden, but it was something. It was life. As I walked, I ran into Martha again, the elderly woman I had met a few weeks ago. She was sitting on one of the benches, knitting something with her hands. She looked up as I approached and smiled. "Margaret," she said warmly. "How's it going, dear?" I sat beside her, feeling comforted by her presence. "It's been difficult," I admitted. "But I'm getting through it. I'm learning to live for myself again." Martha nodded knowingly. "It's a hard thing, letting go of what was and making room for what could be. But you're doing the right thing. You've spent so much of your life caring for everyone else, and now it's time for you to care for yourself." I looked at her, a little surprised by her insight. "I'm trying, but it's hard. My family doesn't understand. They think they know what's best for me, but I've spent my whole life making decisions for them. And now I just want to make decisions for myself." Martha smiled, her eyes crinkling with warmth. "You have every right to, Margaret. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It's your life, not theirs. It may not be easy, and there will be days when you feel lost, but you've got the strength in you to keep going." Her words stayed with me as I went back to my room. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them push me into a corner again. I wasn't going to be a prisoner in my own life. The next day, Carla came to visit again. She sat down beside me, and for a moment we just stared at each other. I could see the same tension in her face, the need to make things right, to fix what was broken. But I knew it couldn't be fixed just by her doing what she thought was best for me. "I've been thinking," Carla began, her voice hesitant. I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you. But I want you to know that I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to listen to you, to understand what you need. I looked at her carefully. I don't need you to fix everything, Carla. I just need you to respect my choices. I need you to understand that I'm not the woman you want me to be anymore. Me. And I deserve to be seen for who I am, not who you want me to be. She nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with tears. I know. I've been selfish. And I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I just want you to be okay. I reached over and took her hand. It was a small gesture, but in that moment it meant everything. I know you want what's best for me, Carla. But you have to understand that what's best for me might not be what you want. I'm not here for your approval. I'm here for me. She squeezed my hand, nodding silently. We sat together for a while, the quiet between us filled with understanding. Carla was starting to see me, not just as her mother, not just as the woman who raised her, but as a person with her own life, her own desires, her own right to make decisions. Later that week, Ben came by. He had been quiet lately, withdrawn, and I could tell he was struggling with his own guilt. He sat down beside me, his face tired. Mom, I know I've messed up, he began, his voice low. I know I haven't been there for you, and I'm sorry. I thought I was doing what was best, but I see now that I wasn't. I just wanted you to be safe, but I didn't take into account how you felt. And for that I'm sorry. I looked at him, the sadness in his eyes raw. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of everything we had lost. It's not just about being safe, Ben, I said softly. It's about being free. I've spent my life taking care of everyone else. I need to live for myself now. I need to be free to make my own choices, even if they're not what you want. He nodded, his face filled with regret. I understand. And I'll support whatever you decide. I just want to make sure you're happy. I smiled, feeling the bond between us start to heal. Thank you, Ben. That's all I need. Support, not control. The days after my conversation with Ben and Carla felt like a fragile truce. We had spoken our truths, made apologies, and acknowledged the mistakes we'd made. But nothing was perfect. Not yet. And I knew it would take time before we could heal. The road was long, and there were still moments of tension. There were still moments when I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the past to come crashing down on us again. But I also knew one thing. I wasn't going to let the past define me anymore. I had spent too many years living for others, sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of my family. It was time to live for myself. It was time to take back control. One afternoon, after spending the morning in the garden with the other residents, I decided to take a walk outside. The weather was warmer now, and the sun felt good on my face. I walked around the perimeter of the nursing home, breathing in the fresh air, letting the wind rush through my hair. For the first time in a long time I felt a spark of freedom, just the simple act of walking, of being outside, of feeling the ground beneath my feet. As I walked, I noticed a group of people gathered near the entrance, talking in low voices. It wasn't unusual to see people mingling, but something about this conversation seemed different. Curiosity got the best of me, and I walked over, trying to get a better look. It was then that I saw him. A man, probably in his late 60s, with silver hair and a strong, weathered face, was speaking with a nurse. He was leaning against the wall, looking out at the horizon. His arms crossed over his chest. There was something about him, something in the way he carried himself, in the quiet authority that seemed to radiate off of him. I didn't know why, but I felt compelled to approach him. I wasn't one to start conversations with strangers, but something told me this was different. "Hello," I said softly, stepping closer. "I couldn't help but notice you. I'm Margaret." The man turned his head slowly, his piercing blue eyes meeting mine. He studied me for a moment before offering a small, polite smile. "I'm Henry," he said, his voice low but calm. "It's not every day I meet someone who has the courage to talk to a stranger in a place like this." I chuckled softly. "I suppose we all get a little stuck in our own worlds here." He nodded, his gaze drifting back toward the horizon. True. But it doesn't have to be that way. We still have choices. It's just a matter of remembering that. His words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. I had been living in a world of limitations for so long, letting others decide my fate, letting my circumstances control me. But what Henry was saying, it made me realize that I still had choices. I didn't have to accept this life, this place, if it wasn't what I wanted. You sound like you know what you're talking about, I said, a hint of curiosity in my voice. How did you end up here? Henry gave a small, almost rueful smile. Well, it's a long story. I spent most of my life working as a contractor. Built homes, fixed things. But then age caught up with me. I don't have anyone left to take care of me, so here I am. But I don't mind. You learn to make peace with it, you know. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to admit. I had spent so many years taking care of others, keeping the peace, that I had lost sight of what I wanted, what I needed. I didn't want to just make peace with this place. I didn't want to settle. Well, Henry, I said, meeting his eyes with renewed determination, I think I need to start making different choices. He raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. What kind of choices? I took a deep breath. The kind that matter to me. I'm not ready to just sit here and fade away. I'm not ready to let this be my life. Henry studied me for a moment, his gaze sharp. Then, without missing a beat, he said, You've got fire in you, Margaret. Can see that. And it's about time you let it burn. His words stayed with me long after I walked back to my room. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stir inside me. It wasn't a simple desire to escape or run away. It was a desire to live, to take back my autonomy, to make decisions that would shape my future no matter what anyone thought. I was no longer going to be a passive participant in my own life. The next day, I went to the nursing home director and asked about the possibility of volunteering outside the facility, helping with community programs or working with local organizations. I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself again. I wanted to stop waiting for others to give me permission to live. To my surprise, the director was supportive. We encourage our residents to get involved in the community. It's a wonderful way to stay connected and engaged. I smiled, my heart lifting. I'm ready to give it a try. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead was still full of uncertainty, full of challenges, but I was no longer afraid. I had a purpose again. And that was more than I could have asked for. That night I called Carla and Ben. I didn't know if they were ready to hear this, but it was time they understood. I wasn't giving up. I've been thinking a lot, I said when they picked up the phone. And I've decided I'm not going to sit here and fade away. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to find ways to help, to make a difference. You may not understand it, but it's time for me to take control of my future. There was silence on the other end of the line before Ben spoke. His voice soft but sincere. Mom, we just want you to be happy. I know, I said, my voice firm now. And I will be. Just not in the way you expect. The conversation wasn't easy. But it was necessary. I was no longer waiting for them to give me permission. I was taking back my life. And I wasn't going to let anyone decide my worth for me. It's been a few weeks since I made the decision to take control of my life. And though there are moments when the weight of this new journey feels overwhelming, I know I'm doing the right thing. The days have started to blend together. Busy with the activities I've joined, the new people I've met, and the small but meaningful ways I've begun to reclaim my independence. Every Thursday, I meet with a community center to help with their outreach program. I work with the elderly in the local neighborhood, some of them much older than me, teaching them how to use computers or helping them write letters to their families. It's not glamorous work, but it fills me with purpose. When I'm with them, I feel connected to the world in a way I haven't in years. On Tuesdays, I volunteer at the local food bank. I help package meals and distribute them to families in need. The work is hard, and it often leaves my back aching, but the sense of accomplishment when I see people's smiles as they walk away with their food makes it worth it. It's strange how much I've changed. Just a few months ago, I was waiting for someone to decide my fate for me. Now, I'm doing things that matter, things that make me feel like I'm contributing, that make me feel alive. But as much as I've been pushing forward, something still gnaws at me. Carla and Ben, though they've been supportive of my newfound independence, haven't quite understood the full extent of my decision. They call, and I hear the concern in their voices, the underlying worry that I'm doing too much too fast. They don't realize that I'm not doing this to prove anything to them. I'm doing it because it's what I need. One evening, after a long day of volunteering, I found myself sitting alone in my room, looking at the phone. Carla had called earlier, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready for another conversation where I had to explain myself again, where I had to justify my actions. But I knew that sooner or later I'd have to talk to them. They were my children. I couldn't just push them away forever. I dialed Carla's number, my fingers trembling slightly. She picked up on the third ring. "Mom," she answered, her voice tight. "Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the conversation I knew was coming. "I'm fine, Carla," I said softly. "I just wanted to check in. I've been busy with the food bank and the community center. It's been good for me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I'm glad you're keeping busy, Mom," Carla said, her voice barely masking her concern. "But I'm still worried. I know you say you're okay, but I just don't want you to push yourself too hard. You've been through a lot." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Carla, I'm doing this for me." My voice caught slightly, but I steadied it. "I don't want you or Ben to worry about me anymore. I've made my choice. I'm taking care of myself. This is what I need right now." "I know, Mom," she said, her voice softening. "But I'm still your daughter. I can't help but worry about you." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, my thoughts swirling. "I know you do, Carla, and I appreciate that. But I can't keep living my life for your approval. I have to live for me now. I hope you understand that." "I do," she whispered. "I really do." I closed my eyes, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Carla wasn't fully on board yet, but I could hear the acceptance in her voice. She was starting to understand that this wasn't just about pushing them away. It was about me finding my own way. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Carla added, her voice breaking slightly. "I don't say it enough, but I am. And I love you." "I love you too," I said, my voice steady. "I'll be okay, Carla. I promise." When we hung up, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I knew there would be more difficult conversations to come, but for now I was moving forward, and I was no longer apologizing for it. The next morning I woke up early to go for a walk in the park. The fresh air and the sound of the birds always calmed my mind. As I walked along the familiar path, I noticed an elderly woman sitting on a bench, feeding the birds. She looked to be in her late 80s, her back slightly hunched, but there was a peacefulness about her that made me want to sit and talk. I sat beside her, and we exchanged pleasantries. Her name was Grace, and she had been coming to the park for years. We talked about our lives, our families, and the things that mattered most. Grace had lost her husband years ago, and her children lived far away. But she had a quiet strength that I admired. "I've had my share of struggles," she said with a smile, "but I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is to let go. Let go of the things you can't control and make peace with the life you've been given." Her words stayed with me long after I left the park. She was right. I had spent so many years trying to control everything, trying to fix things for everyone else. But now I was finally learning to let go, to live for myself, and to embrace the uncertainty of life. I returned to the nursing home with a sense of clarity I hadn't had before. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but it was mine to walk. And with each step I was reclaiming myself. The sun was setting as I sat on the bench outside the nursing home, the cool evening air brushing across my face. I had spent the afternoon at the community center, helping with the senior exercise class, and though I felt good about the work I was doing, there was still an unease that lingered in the back of my mind. I had made a decision to live for myself, to reclaim my independence, but as the days passed, I realized that the past still had a hold on me, one I couldn't just shake off. I had spent so many years focusing on everyone else, my children, my husband, my friends, that I had lost sight of who I was. But now, as I worked to build my own life again, it felt like the past was constantly tugging at my sleeve, reminding me of the things I hadn't forgiven, the things I hadn't let go of. The most prominent of those things was the way my children had treated me. I tried not to dwell on it. I tried to tell myself that they did what they thought was best, but the truth was they didn't understand. They had taken my autonomy away, they had made decisions for me, and they had left me feeling like I wasn't capable of making my own choices. It was hard to let go of that. It was hard to forgive them for that. As I sat on the bench, I heard a soft voice beside me. "Mind if I join you?" I turned to see Grace, the elderly woman I had met in the park, standing there with a warm smile. She was leaning on her cane, but there was something comforting about her presence, something steady. "Of course," I said, patting the spot next to me. "I could use some company." She sat down beside me, her eyes thoughtful as she looked out at the sunset. For a moment we both just sat in silence, watching the colors paint the sky. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day," I said, breaking the quiet. "About letting go. About finding peace with the life I've been given." Grace nodded, her eyes soft. "It's not an easy thing to do, Margaret. Letting go of the past, letting go of old wounds. But it's the only way to move forward." I sighed, the weight of my emotions pressing down on me. "I want to move forward." "Do. But it's hard. It's hard to let go of the hurt, of the way my children treated me. They think they know what's best for me, but they don't see me. They don't see the woman I am, the person I've always been." Grace turned to me, her gaze steady. "I know that feeling. When my children were younger, they thought they knew everything. They thought I couldn't take care of myself, that I was too old to be on my own. They tried to make decisions for me, tried to force me into a life I didn't want. But I realized, just like you're realizing, that I have to live for myself. Not for them, not for anyone else. For me." I nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "I've been holding on to that anger, Grace. The way they took my choices away. It's hard to forgive them for that." Grace smiled gently, her eyes kind. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Margaret. Doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means letting go of the hold that anger has on you. It means choosing to move forward, not for them, but for yourself." Her words resonated deep within me. I had spent so much of my life holding on to the past, holding on to the resentment that had built up over the years. But Grace was right. Holding on to that anger wasn't helping me. It was only holding me back. "I'm trying," I said quietly. "But it's hard to let go. It feels like I'm letting them off the hook." Grace reached over and placed a hand on mine, her grip surprisingly strong. "You're not letting them off the hook. You're letting yourself off the hook. Anger is like a weight we carry around with us. It only drags us down. When you choose to forgive, not for them but for yourself, you free yourself." I sat in silence, feeling the weight of her words sink in. It wasn't easy. Letting go of the past was never going to be easy, but maybe, just maybe, I could find peace in it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood up from the bench, feeling a little lighter. "Thank you, Grace," I said, my voice full of gratitude. "I needed to hear that." She smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Anytime, Margaret. Anytime." I walked back to my room that night, my heart a little fuller, my steps a little steadier. The road ahead was still long, but I was starting to see that forgiveness wasn't just about other people. It was about me. About giving myself the peace I deserved. That night I made a decision. I was going to call Carla. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew that it was time to have that conversation. It was time to stop letting the silence and resentment rule my life. My name is Margaret Jenkins, and I'm 75 years old. I've lived in the same house on the outskirts of a small town in Maine for most of my life. The smell of pine trees and the sound of birds chirping outside my window are my constants, my peace. I spent decades raising my children, holding my family together through thick and thin. But the years don't spare anyone, and the hands of time slowly chipped away at my independence. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I was never supposed to end up here. That's the thought that runs through my head every morning when I wake up in this sterile room, surrounded by walls that close in on me. I used to wake up in my own bed, with the sunlight streaming in through the window. Now, I wake up to the sound of a nurse's footsteps and the faint smell of antiseptic in the air. They put me in a nursing home against my will. I had lived alone for years after my husband, Frank, passed. I didn't need anyone. I took care of myself, cooked, cleaned, and even kept up with a garden in the backyard. My children, Carla and Ben, would come to visit every so often, but I never needed them to care for me. I always told them that. But then, one morning, Carla came over and sat me down on the couch. She looked at me, her face tense. "Mom, it's time." "Time for what?" I asked, already sensing what was coming. "It's time for you to move into a care facility," Carla said softly, almost like she was trying to break the news gently. "You're not taking care of yourself. We've been talking about this for a while." I shook my head. "No, absolutely not. You can't keep living on your own, Mom. It's not safe. The doctor said." I stood up, cutting her off. "I don't need anyone's help. I'm fine. I've been fine. And I will continue to be fine." Carla's eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't give in. "Mom, please, I'm just trying to do what's best for you." I felt my heart crack, but my pride wouldn't allow me to show it. I couldn't let my daughter think I was helpless. I had never been helpless. A few days later, Carla came to my house with a car packed full of things: clothes, toiletries, and a folder labeled medical information. I knew then what was happening. She wasn't asking. She wasn't even giving me a choice. Before I could protest, Ben arrived, his expression hard as steel. "Mom, we've already made the arrangements. You're coming with us." "No," I snapped. "I'm not going anywhere." But before I knew it, I was in the back of their car, the road blurring outside the window. Carla's face was tense, and Ben said nothing. I felt like I was in a nightmare, my life unraveling as I sat there, unable to stop it. We arrived at the nursing home, and it was nothing like I had imagined. The halls were wide, with fluorescent lights hanging from the ceiling, and everything smelled too clean. There were other elderly people here, some in wheelchairs, others wandering aimlessly, but none of them looked like they had a choice. "Mom, this is for the best," Carla said, her voice soft but firm. "You'll be around people your age. You won't have to worry about anything." I wanted to scream, to fight, to claw my way out of there. But I couldn't. I felt small, powerless, as they led me to my room. My heart sank when I saw the white walls, the hospital bed, the barren windowsill. This wasn't my home. Never would be. "You'll get used to it," Ben said, his voice flat. "It's not so bad. Just give it time." But it was bad. It was suffocating. And as they left, the door clicked shut behind them, and I was alone in that sterile, cold room. I sat on the bed, staring at the walls. My mind raced. How did I get here? Thought. How did everything I worked for, everything I fought for, just slip away like this? The quiet was deafening. The loneliness was suffocating. I was trapped, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The morning after my conversation with Grace, I felt a strange mixture of clarity and unease. It wasn't that I had all the answers, I didn't. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. I had started to forgive myself, to stop holding on to the resentment that had been eating away at me for years. But that was only the beginning. The real test lay ahead. I had made the decision to call Carla. After everything that had happened, after all the hurt and the silence, I knew it was time to confront the one thing I had been avoiding for months. The conversation I had been running from. The conversation that would finally bring the distance between us to the surface. I wasn't sure what to expect when I dialed her number. The thought of hearing her voice again brought both comfort and anxiety. I had spent years trying to protect her, trying to keep everything from falling apart, but now I was beginning to realize that I couldn't keep doing that. I couldn't keep holding on to the idea that I had to be everything to everyone. The phone rang once. And then she picked up. Hello. Carla's voice was tentative, unsure. Hi, Carla, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. It's Mom. For a moment there was silence. I could hear the shift in her breath as she processed my voice. Mom. I didn't expect to hear from you. I know. I've been avoiding this call, I said, my voice steady despite the nerves in my stomach. But I think it's time we talk. I could almost feel her hesitation on the other end of the line. She didn't know what to say, didn't know where to begin. But I wasn't going to wait for her to take the lead. I needed to say what I had been holding in for so long. Carla, I've been thinking a lot about everything, about why we're in this situation, why I'm here. I've been angry and I've been hurt, but I've also realized something. I've spent so much time waiting for your approval, for you to understand me, that I've lost myself in the process. I heard her breath catch, and I knew she was listening. Really listening. I don't want to fight anymore, Mom. I just want things to be better between us. I know I've made mistakes, and I regret them. I just want you to know that I love you, and I want to make it right. The words felt like a balm to my soul, but they weren't enough. I needed to hear more than just apologies. I needed her to understand the weight of what had happened. I love you too, Carla, I said, my voice softening. But love isn't just about saying the right words. It's about respect. It's about seeing me, really seeing me for who I am, not for who you think I should be. And that's what I've been missing. I've been living my life for you and Ben, trying to make everyone happy. But I haven't been living for myself. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, Mom, Carla whispered. I never meant to make you feel that way. I thought I was doing what was best for you, but I didn't realize how much I was taking from you. I should have listened to you, really listened. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like she understood. It wasn't about the past anymore. It was about moving forward. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, Carla, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But it's not just about me anymore. It's about us. I want us to be able to talk, to be honest with each other. I want to be a part of your life, but I also want you to be a part of mine, without expectations or judgments. I want that too, Mom, Carla said, her voice breaking slightly. I want to be there for you. I'm just so sorry for everything. I know you are, I said, wiping away the tears that had started to fall. But now we have to move forward. I can't keep holding on to the anger. And I don't want you to either. We need to find a way to make this work, for both of us. There was a long silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a quiet understanding, a moment of realization. I'll do better, Mom, Carla said, her voice filled with sincerity. I promise. I know you will, I replied, my voice firm but filled with love. And I'll be here. But we have to take it one step at a time. I'm ready, Carla said softly. One step at a time. The conversation ended on a note of tentative hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. I wasn't expecting everything to be fixed right away, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page. We were both ready to try. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was no longer walking it alone. Carla and I were finding our way back to each other, and that was more than I could have asked for. It's been a few weeks since that phone call with Carla. Since then, things between us have felt different. Not perfect, but better. The air between us has cleared, and the silence that once stretched uncomfortably between us has begun to dissipate. We still have our moments of misunderstanding, but we're working through them. I can feel the distance narrowing, but I also know that this is a long road. Healing doesn't happen overnight. Trust doesn't return with a simple apology, and the walls that I've built up over the years don't crumble in an instant. Takes time. But we're trying. Ben has also been more present. He visits more often now, and each time, it feels like we're slowly stitching the fabric of our relationship back together. It's not easy for him, I can tell. There's still guilt in his eyes, still hesitation in his movements. But he's here, and that counts for something. It's a slow process, but I'm learning to be patient with them and with myself. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the lounge reading a book, I overheard a conversation between two of the other residents. I wasn't eavesdropping intentionally, but the words caught my attention. They were discussing their children, their families. One woman was talking about how her son had placed her in a nursing home against her will. Her voice was bitter with resentment, and she couldn't seem to let go of the anger that had built up over the years. I could hear the pain in her voice, and it made me reflect on my own journey. Yes, I had been hurt. Yes, I had been pushed into this situation by my children, and yes, I still carried that sting. But I also knew that I wasn't going to let that resentment define me forever. It wasn't easy to forgive, but I was learning that forgiveness didn't mean letting them off the hook. It meant giving myself the freedom to move on. The freedom to live the rest of my life with peace, rather than carrying the weight of old wounds. I couldn't keep holding on to the past, just as I couldn't keep holding on to the idea that Carla and Ben had to fix everything. I had to fix it for myself. That evening, Carla came to visit. We sat in the common area, just the two of us, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. No heavy expectations, no hard conversations. Just us, talking about simple things. How her day had gone, what she had planned for the weekend, the little things that seemed so insignificant but meant everything in rebuilding a relationship. After a while, she turned to me, her expression more serious. "Mom," she began softly, "I know things aren't perfect, and I know you've been hurt. But I need to tell you something. I think I've finally figured out how much you've sacrificed for us, how much you've done for me and Ben over the years. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. "I didn't do it for recognition, Carla," I said quietly. "I did it because I love you. I love both of you, and I always have. But you were right, I've spent so many years sacrificing myself for the sake of everyone else that I forgot to live for me. I forgot to put myself first sometimes." Carla reached over and took my hand, her grip gentle but firm. "I see that now, Mom. I see it, and I'm sorry for all the times I didn't understand. I know I can't change the past, but I want to make things right going forward. I want to make sure you know how much I love you, how much you mean to me." Her words were simple, but they were enough. They were everything. For a moment, we just sat there, the quiet between us not uncomfortable, but filled with an understanding that hadn't been there before. I was learning to forgive her, to forgive myself, and to embrace the idea that we weren't perfect, but we were still family. Later that evening, I went to my room, my heart lighter than it had been in months. I had made peace with my decision to forgive, to let go of the bitterness that had been consuming me. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, I felt more hopeful than I had in years. The next morning, Ben came to visit me. He was quieter than usual, and I could sense the weight on his shoulders. He had a hard time letting go of the guilt he carried, but I could see that he was trying to make up for lost time, trying to show me that he cared. "Mom," he said, sitting beside me, "I don't have the right words, but I just wanted you to know that I'm here. I'm sorry for the way I've treated you, for not being there when you needed me. I'll be here for you no matter what." I smiled softly, my heart full. "You're here now, Ben. That's all that matters. We're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed that. The days that followed my conversations with Carla and Ben felt like the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. It was still hard. There were still moments when the weight of the past threatened to pull me back into the darkness. But I was learning to let go. Learning to trust, not just them but myself. I spent my days volunteering, helping others, but also taking time for myself. I spent more time in the garden, even if it wasn't my own. I attended the writing classes, rediscovering the joy of putting pen to paper. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for anyone else. I was living for me. Carla and Ben visited regularly, but it wasn't with the same sense of duty. It wasn't a forced visit anymore. We were learning to be family again, slowly but surely. Carla had started to check in more, not with worry or guilt, but out of genuine concern. And Ben, he was showing up. He was there. Not just for the visits, but for the small moments when I needed him. And that meant everything to me. But there was one thing I hadn't anticipated. How much I would grow during this process. How much I would change in ways I never expected. I wasn't just rebuilding my relationships with my children. I was rebuilding my relationship with myself. I wasn't the same woman who had been placed in that nursing home months ago. I wasn't the same woman who had felt invisible, powerless. I was stronger now. And I was ready for whatever came next. One afternoon, Carla called me. Her voice filled with excitement. "Mom, I have something to tell you," she said, her words tumbling out. "Ben and I have been talking, and we've decided to move you into your own place. Somewhere close to me. You'll have more freedom, and you won't feel so isolated. It's yours if you want it." My heart skipped a beat. A place of my own. Close to Carla. It sounded like a dream I had been afraid to even hope for. "I don't know what to say," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're sure about this?" Carla laughed softly. "I'm more than sure. You've proven to us that you're stronger than we thought, Mom. And it's time you had your own space, your own life." It was exactly what I had needed. What I had wanted but never thought I would get. It was the freedom to live on my own terms, to make my own decisions. And in that moment I realized that life was about more than just surviving. It was about living. Said yes. I moved into my new place a few weeks later. It was small but perfect. It was mine. I decorated it with the things I loved. Pictures of my grandchildren, the rocking chair that had been passed down through generations, and, of course, some fresh flowers in every room. It wasn't much, but it was everything I needed. And as I stood in the doorway of my new home, I felt a sense of pride that I hadn't felt in years. I had come so far, and I wasn't going to stop now. The next chapter in my life wasn't going to be easy, but it was mine, and I was ready for it. Thank you for following me on this journey. If you've been inspired by my story and are rooting for me as I continue to reclaim my independence, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to my channel. There's so much more to come, and I'm just getting started.